The great hall on Nexus Prime buzzed with voices from hundreds of different species. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the center podium, his crystal body glowing bright blue with anger. Around him sat creatures from across the galaxy, some with scales, others with fur, many with forms that defied easy description. But they all shared one thing in common: fear of humans. "We have been too kind to these Deathworlders," Zethkar announced, his voice echoing through the massive chamber. "They come from a world of death and violence. Every day on their planet is a fight to survive. How can we trust beings who learn to kill before they learn to think?" The crowd made sounds of agreement. Clicks, chirps, and buzzes filled the Yao. Era's representatives from peaceful worlds nodded their various heads. The Vorthons had always been seen as the wise leaders of galactic civilization. Their world was perfect, floating cities above crystal oceans where no one had fought a war in thousands of years. "These humans pretend to be peaceful," Zethkar continued. "But look at their history. They have killed billions of their own kind. They turned their entire planet into a weapon. Even their children play games about war and death." On Earth, Captain Jake Sullivan sat in his command chair aboard the Starship Constellation. The message from the Galactic Council played on his main screen, and his face grew darker with each word. Next to him, Lieutenant Commander Amy Brooks studied the data coming in from their sensor stations. Jake had served the galaxy for 20 years. He had helped end wars, stopped pirates, and saved countless lives. His ship had been called to more rescue missions than any other vessel in space. Now the same people he had protected were calling him dangerous. "Sir, we're picking up massive fleet movements," Amy reported. Her voice stayed calm, but Jake could see the worry in her eyes. "The Vorthons are gathering their ships. Intelligence thinks they plan to block our trade routes." Jake turned to his weapons officer, Commander Ryan Porter. Ryan's grandfather had fought in Earth's last great war, back when humans still fought each other instead of protecting aliens. "What do we have for defense, Ryan?" 47 ships across 12 star systems, sir. The Vorthons are bringing 300. They don't think we'll put up much of a fight." Jake almost smiled at that. For 50 years, humans had been the galaxy's peacekeepers. When the Zalathi and Mordak started shooting at each other, they called for human mediators. When pirates attacked trade ships, they called for human patrol boats. When natural disasters struck alien worlds, they called for human rescue teams. Humans had been so busy helping everyone else that the galaxy forgot where they came from. They forgot that Earth was a world where everything tried to kill everything else. They forgot that humans had climbed to the top of a food chain filled with monsters. Dr. Lisa Carter appeared on Jake's communication screen from her research station on the moon. She had spent her whole career studying alien life, learning how different species thought and acted. Her news was not good. "Captain Sullivan, I've been looking at the biological data from all the major species in the Council. They've made a terrible mistake. They see that humans can be violent and think that makes us evil. They don't understand that our greatest strength comes from choosing to be good when we could easily be bad." Jake nodded. He had seen this before on a smaller scale. Pirates who thought human mercy meant human weakness. They usually learned the truth too late to matter. On the Vorthon homeworld, Admiral Zethkar prepared his fleet for what he thought would be an easy victory. His ships were beautiful works of art, with crystal hulls that caught starlight and turned it into rainbow patterns. Each vessel was a masterpiece of peaceful engineering, designed more for exploration than war. "The humans will surrender quickly," he told his officers. "They know they cannot match our numbers. Their primitive ships are no match for Vorthon technology." Zethkar had studied human military tactics for years. He had watched their peacekeeping operations, seen how they avoided violence whenever possible. He had read reports of human negotiations, where they would rather talk for days than fire a single shot. To him, this proved that humans were weak. He was about to learn the difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight. Back on Earth, President Helen Davis called an emergency meeting. She had spent her career trying to build bridges between Earth and the alien worlds. She believed that cooperation was better than conflict. Now she faced the reality that the galaxy saw cooperation as surrender. "General Martinez," she said to the head of Earth's military, What are our real options here? General Carlos Martinez had fought in the border wars 30 years ago, back when humans still had enemies among their own species. He spread his hands on the conference table and spoke honestly. Madam President, we've been holding back for 50 years. We've kept our weapons at levels that wouldn't scare our neighbors. We've shared our technology and helped build their defenses. Now they want to use all of that against us. Amy Brooks, now serving as Earth's intelligence chief, added her report. The Vorthans think they understand human warfare because they've watched our peacekeeping missions. They have no idea what humans are really capable of when we stop being nice. The truth was that humanity had been playing a careful game for half a century. They had hidden their true military power behind friendly faces and helpful attitudes. When alien worlds asked for help with their defense systems, humans had built them weapons that looked impressive but were actually quite weak. When alien species wanted to learn human tactics, they were taught the basics but never the advanced strategies. This wasn't done out of cruelty, but out of kindness. Humans knew that if the galaxy truly understood what Deathworld evolution had created, they would never sleep peacefully again, so humans had pretended to be weaker than they were, letting other species feel safe and superior. Now that kindness was being repaid with invasion. Admiral Kate Thompson took command of Earth's defense fleet as the Vorthan ships entered the solar system. Her vessels looked small and weak compared to the crystal giants approaching Earth. The enemy outnumbered her 6-1, and their ships were twice the size of hers. But Thompson knew something her enemies didn't. Every human ship had been built with hidden capabilities. The defensive systems the galaxy had observed were actually modular weapon platforms that could be reconfigured in minutes. The exploration vessels were actually hunter-killers that had been disguised as science ships. Most importantly, every human crew had been trained for real war, not the polite conflicts that passed for battles in the civilized galaxy. All ships prepare for Protocol 7, Thompson ordered from her flagship, the Resilience. Around her, her crew moved with the quiet efficiency of predators. They showed no fear, no excitement, just the cold focus that had kept their species alive on a world full of death. As the Vorthon fleet approached Earth, Admiral Zethkar felt confident in his victory. The human ships seemed to be running away, scattering in all directions like frightened animals. Some headed for the asteroid belt, others dove toward the gas giants, and a few simply disappeared into the darkness between planets. To Zethkar, this looked like panic. He divided his fleet to chase down the fleeing humans, expecting to pick them off one by one. He had no idea that he was falling into a trap that had been perfected by millions of years of evolution. On Earth, the galaxy was about to learn why humans had become the dominant species on a planet where everything was designed to kill them. They were about to discover what happened when Deathworlders stopped pretending to be civilized. The first sign that something was wrong came when the human ship stopped running. Admiral Zethkar watched from his crystal bridge as the scattered human vessels suddenly turned around. What had looked like a panicked retreat became something else entirely. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, his voice shaking with confusion. "The human ship near Europa just dropped its stealth systems. It's targeting our 3rd Squadron." Zethkar looked at his tactical display. The human vessel was tiny compared to his crystal warships, barely a quarter their size. How could such a small ship threaten his mighty fleet? The answer came in the form of metal projectiles moving at impossible speeds. The human ship fired simple chunks of iron and steel, but they had been accelerated to nearly the speed of light. When they hit the Vorthan vessels, the impact was like being struck by small suns. 6 Vorthan ships died in the first 3 seconds. "Impossible," Zethkar whispered, watching his beautiful crystal vessels shatter like glass. "Humans don't use kinetic weapons. They're too primitive for such crude tactics." His tactical officer, young Kethvar, stared at the readings with growing horror. "Admiral, those projectiles were fired from ranges that should be impossible. They're targeting systems. How are they tracking us through our stealth fields?" The answer lay in millions of years of evolution. On Earth, humans had learned to hunt prey that could hide, camouflage, and trick the senses. They had developed instincts for tracking movement, predicting behavior, and finding patterns in chaos. What seemed like advanced alien stealth technology was just another form of camouflage to human eyes. Captain Peterson, commanding the human ship Hawkeye from the rings of Saturn, demonstrated another aspect of human warfare that the galaxy had never seen. His vessel had been hiding in the ice and rock of Saturn's rings, completely invisible to Vorthon's sensors. When he struck, it was with the patience of a predator that had learned to wait days for the perfect moment. "Target their command ship," Peterson ordered his weapons officer. "Let's show them what happens when you corner a human." The Hawkeye fired a spread of missiles that looked primitive compared to Vorthon energy weapons. But these missiles had been designed by a species that understood survival. They could change course mid-flight, avoid defensive fire, and coordinate with each other to overwhelm enemy shields. More importantly, they had been built to work in environments that would destroy more delicate alien technology. Meanwhile, across human space, the withdrawal of human personnel was causing chaos on alien worlds. Commander Sam Tucker had been working with the Klaxons for 5 years, helping them develop new ways to grow food on their desert homeworld. The insect-like aliens had always been grateful for human help, treating Sam like a member of their extended family. Now he was packing his equipment while Hive Speaker Klaktar watched nervously. "Dr. Tucker," the alien chittered, his compound eyes reflecting worry. "Why do your people abandon us? Have we given offense?" Sam felt his heart break a little. The Klaxons had never been anything but kind to him. They had shared their culture, their food, even their young. But orders were orders. "It's not you, Klaktar. The Galactic Council has decided that humans are too dangerous to work with other species. We're being recalled to human space." As Sam's ship lifted off from the Klaxon homeworld, he could see the alien farmers standing in their fields, watching their human helpers disappear into the sky. Within hours, crop diseases that had been held in check by human agricultural science began to spread. The Klaxons had grown dependent on human knowledge without realizing it. The same scene played out across the galaxy. On Rigel 7, the Arcturian mining operation lost its human safety inspectors. These humans had spent decades learning how to work in the dangerous underground tunnels, developing techniques that kept alien workers safe. Without them, the first major accident happened within 6 hours. 17 Arcturian miners died in a cave-in that human expertise could have prevented. On Kepler 442b, Lieutenant Colonel Beth Morgan commanded the human peacekeeping force that had kept 2 alien species from killing each other for 30 years. The Zalathi and Mordak had been fighting over territory and resources for centuries before humans arrived to mediate their disputes. Beth watched from her ship as ancient hatreds flared back to life. Within hours of her departure, Zalathi warriors were attacking Mordak settlements. The careful peace that had taken decades to build crumbled in a single day. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving distress calls from both sides. They're begging us to come back." Beth closed her eyes and tried not to think about the civilians who would die because politicians on distant worlds had decided humans were too dangerous to trust. Back in the Sol system, the battle was reaching its climax. Admiral Thompson had revealed the true nature of human military doctrine. While other species built massive, beautiful ships designed to intimidate enemies, humans built ships designed to win. The human vessel Retribution demonstrated this by doing something that should have been impossible. Commander Ryan Porter ordered his ship to jump directly into the middle of the Vorthon formation, a maneuver that would kill any normal crew from the gravitational stress. But humans weren't normal. They came from a world with crushing gravity, deadly radiation, and atmospheric pressure that would flatten most aliens. The same forces that made Earth a death world had made humans incredibly resilient. "All weapons. Fire at will," Porter commanded, calmly, even as his ship shook from enemy fire. The Retribution's weapon systems, which had looked like simple defensive arrays to alien observers, revealed their true nature as coordinated ship killers. The human ship's artificial intelligence, something that terrified most alien species, worked with the crew to engage multiple targets simultaneously. While other species feared giving machines too much intelligence, humans had learned to work with their artificial partners as extensions of their own hunting instincts. Dr. Lisa Carter, Watching the battle from her lunar research station provided the analysis that explained humanity's sudden transformation, from peaceful mediators to deadly warriors. The Galactic Council made a fundamental error, she reported to President Davis. They assumed that because we chose to be peaceful, we were naturally weak. They never understood that humans became the galaxy's peacekeepers because we're the only species that truly understands violence well enough to control it. The truth was that every human child learned about war and conflict as part of their basic education. Not because humans loved violence, but because they needed to understand it to prevent it. Every human diplomat had studied military strategy. Every human scientist understood weapons technology. Every human explorer carried the genetic memory of ancestors who had survived by being smarter, tougher, and more adaptable than anything that tried to kill them. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council chambers filled with panicked representatives as news of the battle reached them. Speaker Vexthi of the Centauri Collective, whose people had worked with humans for decades, addressed the assembly with growing alarm. "We thought we knew them," she said, her tentacles writhing with distress. "Our security advisors were human, our rescue teams were human, our peacekeepers were human. How could we have been so wrong about their nature?" The answer came from Elder Mordak of the Iridian Republic. The ancient alien had lived through the rise and fall of many galactic civilizations. His species was old and wise, and he had seen patterns that younger races missed. "We were not wrong about their nature," he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We were wrong about what their nature meant. Humans are indeed violent. They are predators from a world of death. But they are also the only species in the galaxy that chose to use that violence to protect the weak instead of prey upon them." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "For 50 years they made themselves vulnerable to keep us safe. They accepted our insults and restrictions because they understood that we feared them. They allowed us to believe we were their equals because they knew the truth would terrify us." As the elders spoke, the full scope of the disaster became clear. Humans hadn't been hiding their weakness. They had been hiding their strength. They hadn't needed the galaxy's protection. The galaxy had needed theirs. And now, for the first time in 50 years, the Deathworlders had stopped being friendly. Admiral Zethkar's flagship shook as another human missile tore through his fleet. The crystal hull of the Eternal Harmony cracked under the stress, sending rainbow light scattering across the bridge. Around him, his officers worked frantically, at their stations, but their beautiful technology seemed useless against human weapons. "Admiral, we've lost over 200 ships," his communications officer reported, her crystalline voice breaking with static. "The humans, they're not fighting like any species we've studied. They're everywhere at once." Zethkar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human fleet that had seemed so small and scattered was systematically destroying his forces. Ships appeared from behind asteroids, dropped out of hyperspace inside his formations, and struck from impossible angles. It was like fighting shadows that could kill. "Signal retreat," he ordered, his pride cracking like his ship's hull. "All vessels, withdraw to the edge of the system." But even retreat proved difficult. Human ships followed them like hunting wolves, picking off stragglers and damaged vessels. The humans weren't just winning the battle. They were teaching the galaxy a lesson about what real warfare looked like. Captain Sullivan, now coordinating the human defense from Earth orbit, watched the Vorthan fleet flee. He felt no joy in the victory. These aliens had been his friends once. He had shared meals with Vorthan diplomats, learned about their culture, even helped them design their planetary defense systems. "Sir," Amy Brooks reported from her station, "the surviving Vorthan ships are broadcasting on all frequencies. They're asking for mercy." Sullivan's face remained hard. "Tell them mercy is what they received for 50 years. This is what happens when mercy is rejected." Across the galaxy, news of the Battle of Sol spread like wildfire. The Vorthan Empire, the most advanced civilization in known space, had been crushed by a species they considered primitive. Panic gripped dozens of worlds as governments realized they had no idea what humans were truly capable of. On the Centauri homeworld, Speaker Vexthi called an emergency session of her planetary council. The tentacled aliens had worked closely with humans for decades, but now they looked at their human-designed defense systems with new eyes. Our entire military was trained by human advisors, one council member said, his tentacles writhing with fear. What if they built weaknesses into our systems? What if they were planning this all along? Vexthi shook her head. No, the humans were always honest with us, but we never understood what that honesty meant. They told us they came from a dangerous world. They warned us about their capacity for violence. We chose to ignore those warnings because we thought we were civilized and they were not. The truth was becoming clear across the galaxy. Humans hadn't hidden their nature. They had simply been polite enough not to demonstrate it. Every alien species that had worked with humans could remember moments when their human partners had seemed strangely calm in dangerous situations, when they had made decisions that seemed too quick and too confident. Now they understood that humans had been operating at a fraction of their capabilities, like adults playing gently with children. On Proxima Centauri B, the Proximan government faced riots as their population realized the truth about their peaceful society. For 30 years, human law enforcement had kept the criminal elements under control. The Proximans had believed their own propaganda about being naturally peaceful, but crime syndicates that had been dormant for decades were already moving to reclaim their territory. Governor Flexon watched from his office as fires burned in the capital city. His security forces, trained by humans but lacking human backup, were overwhelmed within hours. "Sir," his aide reported, "the Broken Moon Syndicate has taken control of the eastern districts. The Red Star Gang is moving on the spaceport. Our forces can't handle this without human support." Flexon closed his eyes. His people had voted to support the restrictions on humans, believing they could maintain order on their own. Now his world was burning, and the humans who could have stopped it were forbidden from helping. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of Kepler 438b, the Klaxon civilization faced its worst crisis in generations. Without human agricultural advisors, their crops were failing to diseases that had been controlled for decades. Hive Speaker Klaktar stood in fields of dying grain, watching his people's future wither in the alien sun. "The young starve," he chittered to his sub-speakers. "Without human knowledge, we cannot heal the soil. Our harvests fail, and winter approaches." The Klaxons had become dependent on human expertise without realizing it. Human scientists had not just helped them grow food. They had protected entire ecosystems from collapse. Now those same ecosystems were dying, and billions of insect-like aliens faced starvation. Dr. Sam Tucker, aboard the human transport ship returning from Klaxon space, received desperate messages from his former colleagues. Each transmission broke, his heart a little more. "Dr. Tucker," Klaktar's voice came through the communicator. "Our young die. We know not how to save them. Please, we meant no harm to your people." Sam stared at the message for long minutes before forwarding it to his superiors. The order to withdraw remained in effect, but he wondered how many aliens would die because politicians had decided humans were too dangerous to trust. On Earth, President Davis faced the most difficult decision of her career. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy, alien worlds in chaos, civilizations collapsing, and billions of beings suffering because human help had been withdrawn. "General Martinez," she said during an emergency cabinet meeting, "what's our current situation?" The general spread holographic displays across the conference table. "Madam President, we control human space completely. The Vorthon fleet has been neutralized and no alien force in the galaxy could threaten us now. But the cost," he gestured to another display showing refugee reports, casualty estimates, and economic collapse projections. 17 wars have started since we withdrew our peacekeepers. 6 famines are developing where our agricultural advisors were removed. Industrial accidents on alien worlds have tripled without our safety inspectors. Amy Brooks, now serving as intelligence director, added her assessment. "The galaxy has learned to fear us, but they've also learned they can't survive without us. We have requests for help coming in from hundreds of worlds." The irony wasn't lost on President Davis. For 50 years, humans had worked to prove they were worthy of galactic civilization. They had shown restraint, offered help freely, and accepted restrictions on their behavior. Now the galaxy was begging for the very assistance they had tried to ban. Admiral Thompson, her fleet now reinforced with vessels returning from across human space, presented the military perspective. Madam President, we have the power to reshape the galaxy however we choose. No species can resist us if we decide to expand human territory. But that's not who we are, President Davis replied quietly. We didn't become the galaxy's peacekeepers because we wanted power. We did it because someone had to keep the peace. Dr. Carter, monitoring the crisis from her lunar station, provided the scientific analysis that would shape humanity's next decision. The galaxy's species fall into two categories, she explained. Those that evolved as prey developed advanced technology and peaceful societies, but they can't defend themselves. Those that evolved as predators either went extinct or became so aggressive they couldn't build stable civilizations. She paused, bringing up genetic and behavioral studies from hundreds of species. Humans are unique. We evolved as persistence hunters on a world full of apex predators. We developed both the aggression needed to survive and the cooperation needed to thrive. We're the only species that can be both warrior and peacekeeper. Captain Peterson, the former scout who had seen more of the galaxy than most humans, offered his perspective during the cabinet meeting. We've seen what happens when we withdraw our protection. The galaxy burns. The question is, do we let it burn, or do we choose to be the firefighters again? The debate that followed would determine the future of galactic civilization. Some argued for isolation, pointing out that the galaxy had rejected human friendship and deserved whatever chaos followed. Others argued for expansion, suggesting that humans should use their military superiority to build an empire. But most remembered what it meant to be human. They remembered that their greatest strength wasn't their ability to destroy, but their choice to protect. They remembered that being from a death world didn't make them death-bringers. It made them life guardians. As the discussion continued, reports kept coming in from across the galaxy. Each one showed another consequence of humanity's withdrawal, another civilization struggling without the help they had taken for granted. The galaxy was learning what happened when Deathworlders stopped being friendly. Now humanity had to decide whether to teach them what happened when Deathworlders chose to be merciful. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was dying. Not from war or disease, but from the absence of those who had kept it alive. In the crystal spires of Nexus Prime, emergency sessions ran day and night as representatives from hundreds of worlds reported the same grim news. Their civilizations were collapsing without human help. Ambassador Kethval of the Vorthon Empire stood before the Galactic Council, his once proud crystalline form now dim and cracked. The defeat at Sol had broken more than his fleet. It had shattered his people's confidence in their own superiority. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice barely carrying across the vast chamber. "I bring word from 17 systems in the former Vorthon territories. Without human peacekeepers to maintain order, subject species have risen in rebellion. Our ability to govern has ended." The chamber erupted in worried chittering, clicking, and buzzing. The Vorthon Empire had been the backbone of galactic civilization for centuries. If even they couldn't maintain control without human help, what hope did smaller nations have? Speaker Vexthi of the Centauri Collective rose from her delegation's seating area. Her tentacles moved in patterns that showed deep distress. "The situation in our territory is equally grave. The Proximan system has descended into chaos. The Taf Klaxon homeworld faces famine. Tau Ceti Station has gone silent after losing 3 research teams. On distant worlds, the consequences of humanity's withdrawal played out in countless tragedies. On Rigel 7, the Arcturian mining consortium had suffered 6 major accidents in as many months. Without human safety experts to guide them, workers died in cave-ins, toxic gas leaks, and equipment failures that could have been prevented. Mine Supervisor Theklos stood in the ruins of Shaft 17, looking at the bodies of workers who had trusted him to keep them safe. The human safety protocols seemed simple when Dr. Martinez had explained them, but implementing them without human guidance had proven impossible. "We need them back," he told his assistant, his rock-like features showing exhaustion. "Our people die because we thought we were too good to learn from Deathworlders." Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of Kepler 438b, Hive Speaker Klaktar watched his people slowly starve. The crop diseases that human scientists had held in check for decades were now spreading unchecked across the planet. Entire hive cities faced empty food stores as winter approached. "Send another message to the humans," he ordered his communications specialist. "Tell them we will give anything, pay any price, if they will just send one agricultural advisor." But the messages went unanswered. Human ships passed through clacks in space, but they no longer stopped to help. The same people who had once rushed to aid any species in need now watched from a distance as civilizations crumbled. Dr. Sam Tucker, now stationed at a human research facility in the Centauri system, received hundreds of such messages daily. Each one was a knife in his heart. He had spent years working with these species, building relationships, sharing knowledge. Now he was forbidden from helping them, even as they died from problems he could easily solve. "Sir," his assistant, Dr. Kelly Brown, said as she brought him the daily reports, "the Klaxon situation is getting worse. Their harvest failure is now estimated at 90%. Without intervention, their population will drop by half before spring." Sam closed his eyes and tried not to think about Klaktar's young offspring, who had always gathered around him when he visited their hive cities. Those children were now among the first to suffer from the famine. On Earth, President Davis faced protesters outside the government buildings every day. Some demanded that humans return to their role as galactic helpers. Others insisted that the aliens deserved their fate for rejecting human friendship. The planet was divided between those who remembered their humanitarian mission and those who had grown tired of being taken for granted. "Madam President," General Martinez reported during their daily briefing, "we're receiving over 10,000 requests for assistance per day. Diplomatic messages, emergency calls, and formal petitions. The Galactic Council has officially requested a meeting to discuss terms for human re-engagement." President Davis looked at the reports scattered across her desk. Each one represented suffering that could be prevented if humans chose to help, but they also represented the same species that had declared humans too dangerous for civilized space just months earlier. "What are our people saying, General? What does Earth want?" "The population is split, ma'am. About 40% want us to return to peacekeeping duties. 30% want us to stay isolated. The remaining 30%, he paused, consulting his notes, want us to use our military advantage to establish human dominance over the galaxy." That last option troubled President Davis most. Some humans had begun to see their military superiority as justification for conquest rather than protection. They argued that if the galaxy couldn't govern itself, then humans should govern it. For them, Admiral Thompson, commanding the now massive human fleet, represented this faction during cabinet meetings. "Madam President, we have the power to bring order to the galaxy. These species have proven they can't maintain civilization without our guidance. Perhaps it's time to stop asking for their permission to help them." The idea had a certain appeal. Human administrators could prevent the famines. Human peacekeepers could stop the wars. Human scientists could solve the technological problems that were crippling alien worlds. If they did it by force rather than invitation, the results would be the same. But Captain Sullivan, recently promoted to admiral after his role in the Sol defense, opposed this thinking. "We didn't become peacekeepers to rule others," he argued. "We did it to serve them. The moment we start imposing our will instead of offering our help, we become the very thing they feared we were." The debate came to a head when an unexpected visitor arrived at Earth. Emperor Vexthul of the Draconian hegemony, whose warrior species had been among humanity's harshest critics, requested permission to address the Terran government personally. Emperor's ship arrived at Earth orbit escorted by a small fleet of human vessels. When he materialized in the presidential conference room via hologram, his scaled features showed exhaustion and defeat. "President Davis," he began, his voice lacking its former arrogance, "I come not as an enemy, but as a supplicant. My empire is dying." The proud warrior species that had once boasted of their military might were facing rebellions they couldn't suppress. Without human mediators to resolve disputes, their subject worlds had erupted in violence. Their own military, trained in the honorable combat traditions of their homeworld, was useless against guerrilla warfare and terrorism. We were fools, Emperor Vexthul continued, his admission carrying the weight of billions of lives. We saw your capacity for violence and assumed it defined you. We never understood that your greatest achievement was not learning to fight, but learning when not to fight. He paused, his reptilian eyes meeting President Davis's gaze through the hologram. We thought civilization meant the absence of violence. You showed us that true civilization means the control of violence. We rejected your guidance because we feared your strength, never realizing that your strength was what kept us safe. The Emperor's words were broadcast across the galaxy, reaching every world that had supported the restrictions on human activity. For the first time, a major galactic leader was publicly admitting that the campaign against humanity had been a mistake. I speak for the coalition of worlds when I offer this, Vexthul concluded. Complete autonomy for human space, unrestricted access to all trade routes, and recognition of humanity as the galaxy's primary peacekeeping force. In exchange, we ask for the return of what we foolishly cast away: your protection. The offer was everything humans could have wanted 6 months earlier: full recognition, equal status, and an end to the restrictions that had limited their activities. But it came at the cost of watching civilizations burn while politicians debated. President Davis looked around the conference room at her advisors. General Martinez favored accepting the offer and returning to peacekeeping duties. Admiral Thompson wanted to demand more, perhaps permanent human oversight of alien military forces. Dr. Carter argued for a gradual return that would include safeguards against future betrayals. But the decision ultimately came down to a simple question: what kind of species did humanity want to be? They had proven they could dominate the galaxy through force. They had shown they could survive in isolation. Now they had to choose whether to be conquerors, hermits, or guardians. Outside the conference room windows, Earth turned slowly in space, a blue marble that had given birth to the only species capable of choosing mercy over vengeance. Soon, that choice would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. The vote took place on a cold morning in December, exactly 1 year after the Galactic Council had first declared humans too dangerous for civilized space. Representatives from every human world gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on Earth, their faces reflecting the weight of the decision they were about to make. President Davis stood at the podium, looking out at the delegates who would determine humanity's future. Behind her, a massive screen showed the galaxy in real time. Red zones marking conflicts, orange areas showing famines and disasters, and small green dots representing the few stable regions that still had human presence. We stand at a crossroads, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. For 1 year we have watched the galaxy burn while we debated our response. Today we choose what kind of species we will be. The debate had raged for months. Some argued for the isolationist path. Let humans expand their own territory and leave the aliens to sort out their own problems. Earth was safe. Human colonies were thriving, and their military was now the strongest force in known space. Why risk human lives for species that had betrayed them? Admiral Thompson represented this view. We owe them nothing, she had argued in countless meetings. They declared us unfit for their civilization. Let them live with the consequences of that choice. Others pushed for the imperial solution. Senator Marcus Webb from the Mars colonies had become the voice of this faction. If they cannot govern themselves, then we must govern them, he declared during the final debate. Human leadership could bring order to the galaxy. We have the military power to enforce peace. But it was Captain Sullivan, now promoted to Admiral, who spoke for the third path. We didn't become peacekeepers to gain power over others, he said, standing before the assembly. We did it because someone had to keep the peace. That hasn't changed. He gestured to the screen behind him where casualty reports scrolled past in an endless stream. Every day we delay, more beings die from problems we could solve. Every day we wait, more civilizations collapse from challenges we could help them face. We are not the galaxy's rulers, but we are its guardians. That is who we chose to be 50 years ago, and it is who we must choose to be today. Dr. Sam Tucker, back from his assignment on the frontier, added his voice to the discussion. I have worked with these species for decades. I have seen their children, shared their hopes, celebrated their achievements. They made a mistake when they feared us, but that doesn't erase years of friendship and cooperation. The personal stories carried weight in the debate. Every human who had served in alien space had similar experiences, bonds formed with alien colleagues, friendships that transcended species boundaries, and memories of working together toward common goals. Dr. Carter provided the scientific perspective that helped frame the decision. Humans are unique in the galaxy, she explained to the assembly. We evolved to be both predators and cooperators. We can dominate through force, but we thrive through partnership. Our choice today will determine whether we become the species that conquers the galaxy or the species that saves it. When the vote was called, the result was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 68% of human representatives chose to return to their role as galactic peacekeepers, but on new terms that would prevent future betrayals. The announcement went out across the galaxy within hours. Admiral Sullivan, now designated as the first Supreme Commander of Galactic Peacekeeping Forces, broadcast the message from the bridge of the newly commissioned Starship Guardian. To the species of the galaxy, he began, his image reaching billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Humanity returns not as your servants, but as your protectors. We are the species that chose to be gentle when we could be terrible. We are the species that chose to build when we could destroy. We are the Deathworlders who chose to be your friends. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle across the void before continuing. You have seen what happens when Deathworlders choose to stop being friendly. You have witnessed the chaos that follows when the Guardians withdraw their protection. We return now with a new understanding between us. The new agreement was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Humans would resume their peacekeeping duties, but they would do so as equals, not as junior partners seeking approval. Human military forces would have the right to intervene in conflicts without seeking permission from local governments. Human scientists and advisors would share their knowledge freely, but their expertise would be respected rather than dismissed. Most importantly, any attempt to restrict human activities or declare them unfit for galactic civilization would result in immediate withdrawal of all human support. The galaxy's response was swift and overwhelming. Within hours of Sullivan's broadcast, requests for human assistance flooded in from across known space. The Klaxons begged for agricultural advisors to save their dying crops. The Arcturians pleaded for safety inspectors to prevent more mining disasters. The Proximans offered to pay any price for the return of human peacekeepers. But perhaps the most significant response came from the Vorthon Empire. Admiral Zethkar, his crystalline form still bearing scars from the Battle of Sol, sent a personal message to Admiral Sullivan. We understand now that you were never our subjects, the message read. You were our teachers, showing us what it means to choose peace over power. We request not your forgiveness, but your guidance. Help us learn to be what you are, strong, enough to be gentle, powerful enough to be merciful. The first human ships to leave Earth orbit under the new agreement carried more than just personnel and equipment. They carried a new understanding of humanity's role in the galaxy. The crews were no longer diplomats trying to prove their worth. They were guardians returning to protect those who could not protect themselves. Dr. Tucker was among the first to return to alien space, heading back to the Klaxon homeworld where his expertise was desperately needed. As his ship approached the planet, he could see the brown patches where crops had failed and the dark areas where hive cities had gone silent. Hive speaker Klaktar met him at the spaceport, his insect-like form showing the effects of months of malnutrition. Dr. Tucker, he chittered, his compound eyes bright with hope. You have returned to us. I never wanted to leave, Tucker replied, already reviewing the agricultural data on his portable scanner. Let's see about saving your harvest. The work began immediately. Human agricultural teams spread across the Klaxon homeworld, bringing with them seeds, medicines, and techniques that could restore the failing ecosystems. But more than that, They brought the knowledge and experience that came from surviving on a world where failure meant death. On Rigel 7, human safety experts returned to the Arcturian mines, implementing protocols that would prevent the accidents that had killed so many workers. On Proxima Centauri B, human peacekeepers restored order to a world torn apart by violence. On Tau Ceti Station, human rescue teams found and saved the research teams that had been missing for months. Everywhere humans returned, stability followed. Not because they imposed their will by force, but because they understood how to solve problems that other species found insurmountable. They were the products of a world that had taught them to survive anything, and they used that knowledge to help others survive as well. Admiral Thompson, despite her earlier opposition to the Soi return, found herself commanding rescue operations in the former Vorthon territories. Her fleet worked alongside alien forces to suppress rebellions and restore order, but she did so with a new understanding of their role. "We are not conquerors," she told her crew as they prepared for another peacekeeping mission. "We are not rulers. We are the guardians who stand between civilization and chaos. That is enough." As the months passed, the galaxy slowly healed from the wounds of the previous year. Trade routes reopened under human protection. Conflicts ended under human mediation. Famines were prevented by human expertise. The red zones on the galactic map turned yellow, then green as stability returned. But everyone remembered the lesson of that terrible year. Every species in the galaxy now understood that their peaceful civilizations existed only because Deathworlders had chosen to be friendly. They remembered what happened when that friendship was rejected, and they made sure never to make that mistake again. And humanity remembered too. They remembered that their greatest strength was not their ability to destroy, but their choice to protect. They were the species that had climbed to the top of a deadly world's food chain, then used that position to guard those who were weaker. In the end, that choice defined them more than any weapon or technology ever could. They were the Deathworlders who chose to be guardians, and the galaxy was safer because of it.